Everywhere outside the United States, a $2,000 Indian motorcycle becomes the backbone of daily life, dominating 70 countries and outselling Harley-Davidson 10-1, while Americans sink deeper into debt for bikes they barely use. Industry giants from China, Italy, and Japan all tried and failed to own the world's streets. Yet most Americans remain unaware of the empire quietly built in their blind spot. What did India figure out that the world's richest country missed? And what happens when their machines finally roll onto United States soil? Let's start with how every other contender collapsed. In the early 2000s, a tidal wave of Chinese motorcycles swept across Africa. Dealers unloaded crates of brand new bikes for as little as $800, sometimes even less. By 2010, over 100 Chinese brands, names like Lifeline, Zongshan, Daying, filled city streets from Lagos to Nairobi. In some markets, Chinese imports made up nearly 90% of new motorcycle sales. The promise was simple: unbeatable price and instant mobility. But the bargain came at a hidden cost. Mechanics in Kigali started calling them one-year bikes. It was not just the price. Riders discovered soft metal frames that bent or cracked within months, bolts stripped out after a single repair, engines seized up long before 20,000 kilometers. A Rwandan taxi rider remembers, "I bought 3 Chinese bikes, all failed within a year. Now I ride an Indian bike, 5 years, 0 problems." Parts became a nightmare. Factories that once churned out motorcycles vanished, switching to kitchen blenders or closing entirely. When something broke, there was nowhere to turn. No spare parts, no service manuals, no one trained to fix them. Bikes that cost a month's wages turned into scrap metal overnight. Numbers don't lie. China's share of African motorcycle imports peaked at nearly 1.8 million units in 2012. But by 2018, that number had crashed by more than 60%. Of the hundreds of Chinese brands that once crowded the market, most disappeared as quickly as they arrived. The streets emptied of broken bikes, but the memory lingered. Cheap was not enough. Riders wanted machines that lasted, parts they could find, and mechanics who knew what to do. A Kigali mechanic sums it up: people learned the hard way. If you want a bike for real work, you need something that lasts more than a year. That lesson left a gap in the market, one that would not stay empty for long. Italy's answer to global mobility comes wrapped in red paint and polished chrome, but the numbers behind the beauty tell a different story. A new Ducati averages around $18,000 before taxes or fees, more than the annual income in dozens of countries where motorcycles are daily survival, not weekend escape. Even in wealthy cities, that price tag lands these machines in garages, not on crowded streets. But the cost does not stop at the showroom. Every 7,500 miles, owners face a mandatory valve clearance service. The bill is often $1,000 or more, and only a specialist can do the job. Miss it, and the warranty vanishes. For most of the world, that is not just inconvenient, it is impossible. The nearest certified Ducati mechanic might be in another country. Try explaining that to a taxi driver in Accra or a courier in Dhaka. The result is clear in the numbers. Italian brands like Ducati, Aprilia, and MV Agusta account for a fraction of a percent in Africa, South Asia, and Latin America combined. These bikes are engineered for perfect roads and perfect weather, places where potholes are rare and gasoline is premium. The reality is this: most riders need a motorcycle that shrugs off bad fuel, broken pavement, and years of hard use. In Peru, Colombia, or Uganda, a $1,500 repair bill could buy an entire new bike from another brand. For millions, Italian motorcycles are as relevant as a Ferrari in a farming village: beautiful, admired, and completely out of reach. The world's need is not for RT on wheels, but for honest machines that work every day. That is a lesson Italy never learned, and why their masterpieces remain museum pieces in most of the world. Honda builds more motorcycles than any company on Earth, 19 million last year alone. For half a century, Japanese engineering has set the global standard. But in Africa, the numbers tell a different story. Honda, Yamaha, and Suzuki together hold less than 30% of the market. The reason is not reliability or performance, it is the price and what comes after the sale. Take the Yamaha XTZ125, a favorite among enthusiasts. The price tag lands at $3,800, more than double what most riders can afford. For someone in Nairobi, that is not just expensive, it is unreachable. But the real pain starts in the workshop. A Honda clutch replacement costs between $80 and $120, and that is if you can even find one. Mechanics report waiting weeks for parts to arrive from Japan. A Nairobi mechanic shakes his head and says, customers come in with a broken clutch and leave the bike for a month. They cannot work, they cannot earn. Japanese brands focus on horsepower, top speed, and cutting-edge tech. But for riders who use motorcycles as daily transport, those features mean little. They want a bike that can survive 200,000 kilometers on rough roads, run on low-quality fuel, and be fixed with basic tools. Instead, they get machines built for weekend rides and smooth highways at a price that rules out most of the world. Numbers do not lie. In cities like Nairobi or Accra, Japanese models are outnumbered by cheaper, more practical alternatives. The gap in pricing and parts support leaves a door wide open, a door about to be kicked in by a new kind of motorcycle empire. The failure is not in the engineering, it is in understanding what riders actually need. 13.7 million motorcycles. That's how many rolled off Indian assembly lines last year. That's more than the entire populations of New York and Los Angeles combined. That single figure accounts for nearly a quarter of all motorcycles produced worldwide, a staggering 22% of global output. These are not just numbers on a balance sheet. They are machines shipped to over 70 countries, from the crowded streets of Lagos to the mountain passes of Peru and the back roads of Sri Lanka. Hero MotoCorp stands at the center of this surge, now the world's second largest motorcycle manufacturer. Last year alone, Hero delivered nearly 6 million bikes, outselling Harley-Davidson, Ducati, and BMW combined. Bajaj Auto, another Indian powerhouse, exported over 4.2 million motorcycles, Boxers, Pulsars, and Dominars, reaching markets as far-flung Uganda, Colombia, and Nigeria. In Uganda, Bajaj's market share for motorcycle taxis regularly tops 80%. TVS Motor, close behind, ships millions more to 80 countries from Bangladesh to Brazil. The global reach is impossible to ignore. Bajaj and TVS have built deep roots in Africa and Latin America, with Bajaj opening its first factory in Brazil in 2024. Royal Enfield, once a British brand and now Indian-owned, crossed the 1 million sales mark last year, with exports climbing double digits and a growing footprint in the United States and Europe. Across South Asia, Indian brands dominate city streets and rural highways alike. In Nepal, Hero operates a 75,000-unit factory. In Bangladesh, Bajaj leads the market with a full-scale manufacturing plant. This is not a story of isolated success. It is a coordinated, relentless push that has reshaped the world's motorcycle markets. Indian bikes have become the backbone of daily life for millions, outpacing Japanese and Chinese rivals, not just in volume, but in sheer global presence. The numbers tell the story. India's motorcycle makers have built an empire, and it is growing larger every year. A $2,000 motorcycle that runs 80 miles on a single gallon, shrugs off potholes, and keeps going past 200,000 kilometers. That is the formula Indian manufacturers brought to the world, and it is not by accident. The secret is not just in the price tag. It is in the way companies like Bajaj, Hero, and TVS reimagined what a motorcycle should be for the billions who depend on them every day. 2000. First, Indian engineers focused on the realities of daily life in cities like Lagos, Kampala, and Dhaka. Riders needed bikes that could handle rough roads, bad fuel, and dust storms, not just for a few years, but for a lifetime. That meant air-cooled engines, simple carburetors, and thick steel frames. Forget about high-tech dashboards or racing-tuned suspensions. The goal was a machine anyone could fix with basic tools using parts found in the next town over. Fuel efficiency was not a bonus, it was a necessity. Getting 80+ miles per gallon keeps costs down for riders who use their bikes to earn a living. Fuel efficiency. Second, Indian manufacturers did not just ship bikes and disappear, they built an ecosystem. Bajaj alone operates around 3,000 service centers across Africa. That is not a typo. 3,000 places where riders can find trained mechanics, shelf-stocked parts, and real support. When a clutch wears out, it is a $25 fix, not a month-long wait for an imported part. TVS and Hero followed the same playbook, training tens of thousands of local mechanics and flooding markets with affordable spares. For a taxi rider, that is the difference between a day of work and a week of lost income. 3,000. Finally, Indian brands customize their bikes for each market. Stiffer suspension for rough roads in Uganda, longer seats for carrying passengers in Ghana, air filters designed for the red dust of Nigeria, engines calibrated to run on whatever fuel is available, no matter how low the octane. These are not afterthoughts, they are deliberate choices that turn a basic motorcycle into a lifeline. That is why, in places where a bike is not a toy but a tool for survival, Indian motorcycles have become the backbone of daily transport. The numbers are impressive, but the real story is in the details, the quiet engineering decisions, and the sprawling support networks that keep millions moving. Lifeline. In the heart of Kampala, where motorcycles crowd every intersection and the city never slows, a single bike can mean the difference between scraping by and building a future. David Mukibi knows this better than most. For nearly a decade, he has worked his Bajaj Boxer through Kampala's endless traffic, rain or shine, sunrise to midnight. The odometer tells its own story, over 200,000 kilometers, all on the original engine. Mechanics shake their heads in disbelief, and numbers don't lie. Every morning, David checks the oil, wipes the dust from the tank, and heads out to carry passengers and parcels across the city's battered roads. What this machine has given him is not just transportation, it is a livelihood. David speaks quietly, but the pride is clear. This bike paid for my children's school, it put food on our table, it helped me buy a small plot of land. For riders like him, the Bajaj Boxer is not a weekend toy or a collector's item. It is the tool that keeps a family moving forward. Repairs are rare and affordable, a clutch for $25, tires from any corner shop, parts always on the shelf. When something breaks, there is no waiting weeks for a shipment from overseas. The local mechanic trained by Bajaj has seen hundreds of these bikes. He knows every bolt and bearing by heart. Service takes an afternoon, not a month. The Boxer shrugs off potholes, bad fuel, and the daily grind. It is built for this life. Stories like David's are common across Uganda. Riders log hundreds of thousands of kilometers, engines untouched, using their earnings to fund homes, school fees, and new opportunities. For millions, the promise of a durable, affordable motorcycle is not just marketing. It is reality, measured in every kilometer and every meal earned. In Kampala, the proof is on the road every day. Walk into most American motorcycle dealerships and ask about a $2,000 commuter bike, and the reaction is almost always the same. A puzzled look, maybe a chuckle, then a quick pivot to $20,000 cruisers gleaming under showroom lights. For decades, the American market has trained riders to think bigger is better, pricier means quality, and motorcycles are weekend luxuries, not daily essentials. The numbers back it up. The average new motorcycle sale in the United States now tops $20,000, often financed over 5 to 7 years. Meanwhile, studies show that 80% of American motorcycle trips are under 10 miles, short commutes, errands, everyday rides that never touch the open highway. But the story doesn't stop at price tags. There is a deeper barrier, a kind of cultural blind spot. Ask an American rider to name a motorcycle brand and the answers come easy. Harley, Honda, Yamaha, Bajaj, Hero, TVS. Most have never heard the names. The reason is not just lack of exposure. Indian manufacturers spend almost nothing on United States marketing. No Super Bowl ads, no dealership banners, no racing teams on TV. Without a familiar logo or a celebrity endorsement, the $2,000 workhorse is invisible. A veteran dealer in Denver puts it bluntly, I could line up a dozen affordable bulletproof Indian bikes, and most customers would still head straight for the big chrome Harley. They want what they know. They want what looks expensive. The result is clear. Reliable, low-cost machines that dominate the rest of the world barely make a ripple in America. It is not about what works, it is about what feels right. And that is exactly why the world's most practical motorcycle remains a secret on United States roads. Royal Enfield now stands with 152 dealerships spread across 48 states in America. That is not a theoretical presence. It is a real growing network. The Himalayan 450, built on the same principles that made Indian motorcycles a force across Africa and Latin America, now lists at $5,799 in the United States. For the first time, the formula that conquered the world is parked on American soil, ready for daily commutes, weekend trails, and everything in between. But the story does not stop there. Bajaj is actively exploring American opportunities, studying the same playbook that built their empire in 70 countries. MotoCorp, the world's number 2 by volume, is quietly evaluating what it would take to enter North America. TVS, with its footprint in over 80 countries, is watching closely. None of these companies have made big, splashy announcements. Instead, they are mapping out the market, learning the rules, and preparing for the right moment. Industry analysts warn that even a small foothold, just a few percentage points of the United States market, could upend the entire budget motorcycle segment in 5 years. The same disruption that swept Africa, South Asia, and Latin America is no longer a distant story. It is arriving in real time. For American riders, the question is not if this change will hit, but when. The world's most practical motorcycles are no longer a secret. The next move belongs to the riders themselves. Right now, 70 countries rely on motorcycles built for reality, not prestige. As Indian brands quietly reshape global markets, the American definition of value faces a reckoning. The next wave of affordable, durable machines is already here, and ignoring it won't stop the shift. Sometimes innovation isn't about going faster, but about finally seeing what has been in plain sight. Would you make the switch? Let me know in the comments.